So, hello and welcome to the next episode of the Self Development with Tactics podcast. And I'm your host, Christopher Wolk, and I'm a 17-year-old graphic design student from Austria. And today, as you can see, we are going to talk about the things we have talked about the last episode and the episode before the last episode, which is Decisive book on how to make decisions and how to make better choices and better decisions actually. And as you can see, there is no microphone underneath me because I've always had it in this cup. And yesterday I just bumped my head because when I speak into this, there is a lot of reverb because hello, you might hear it, which I think isn't the best for the audio quality. So I've now lying it here and you can't really see it, but I will actually be a little bit more aware of speaking directly to it. Maybe if but nevertheless, everything should be fine, and we go on with chapter 6, zoom out and or zoom in, whatever they mean. The outside view doesn't require defeatism, but it does require respect for the likely outcomes. Sometimes people can have access to the perfect set of data and still manage to ignore it. This reminds me on what they have talked or said in the things above, is that you only seek information you want to seek, and if you have a deep opinion about something, you probably will be seeking information that contributes your thinking as it is and or your arguments as they are. But when you're trying to gather good information and reality test your ideas, go talk to an expert. An expert is simply someone who has more experience than you. In short, when you need trustworthy information, go find an expert, someone more experienced than you. Just keep them talking about the past and the present, not the future. Base rates are good at establishing norms. Here are the outcomes we can expect if we make this decision. Close-ups, though, create intuition, which can be just as important. Another variety of close-up involves going to the genba, a Japanese term meaning the real place, or more loosely, the place where the action happens. The inside view, our evaluation of our specific situation. The outside view is how things generally unfold in situations like ours. So the outside view is more objective than your subjective opinion or thinking. The outside view is more accurate, but most people gravitate toward the inside view, which is totally makes sense because we all want something that contributes our thinking, our beliefs, and everything we are thinking about some kind of. A close-up can add texture that's missing from the outside view. To gather the best information, we should zoom and zoom in, outside view and close-up. And I'll just have to read the close-up part again because I didn't really get that one. Base rates are good at establishing norms. Here are the outcomes we can expect if we make this decision. Close-ups, though, create intuition, which can be just as important. Okay, so just about intuition. Chapter 7, Oak, or Oak. To oak is to construct small experiments to test one's hypothesis. Rather than choose all or nothing, choose a little something. That strategy, finding a way to ouch before we leap, is another way we can reality test our assumptions. When we ouch or oak, we bring real world experience into our decision. So I'll read it again because the thing is, when I'm reading it loudly and with you and trying to speak clearly and, so that you can understand everything and especially loudly enough, I do not get anything I'm reading. And afterwards, I sometimes read a little bit through what I've been reading in the episodes, and then I just get everything, which is totally pity. But the most important thing is that you can get something out of it, and you are understanding what I'm talking about, and so on and so on. But let's see. Rather than choose all or nothing, choose a little something, which is something they talked about before in terms of why you shouldn't make whether or not decision, because there are two less options, and often we just don't see the other options, which are likely, or most of the time, just way better. If you just do this, or you either buy this or you buy that, is a dumb question, because you can just buy something else, which is maybe cheaper, or something I've got out of the last episodes is that you should always think of a decision that contributes your preferences, or preferences, because then you see this whether or not question doesn't make any sense. Either you do this or do that, and when nothing really contributes your preferences, or is good for your preferences and contributes them, then you should think about or think of another option, another alternative, and so on. Because I think that wouldn't make any sense to really really choose an alternative, an option that doesn't make any sense for you, or is just doing you harm. But let's see, actually, where did I stop? Ouching is loosey for situations that require commitment, but best for situations where we genuinely need more information. So what's ouching? I don't really get it in today's episode. To ouch or oak, whatever, is to construct small experiments to test one's hypothesis. Rather than choose all or nothing, choose a little something. That strategy, finding a way to ouch before we leap, is another way we can reality test our assumptions. So doing some kind of experiments with the hypothesis. Which seems like, you say that every car is expensive, and then I'll give you a Fiat Punto, and then it's it's not really cheap, but it's not that expensive, which would be some kind of reality test or a small experiment, I think. Oaking is short, should be used as a way to spend up the collection of trustworthy information, not as a way to slow down a decision that deserves our full commitment. We try to predict success via interviews, we should ouch instead. Chapter 8, Overcome Short-Term Emotion. We need to downplay short-term emotion in favor of long-term values and passions. To do a 10-10-10 analysis, think about a decision on 3 different time frames. How will you feel about it in 10 minutes from now? How about 10 months from now? And how about 10 years from now? Which is a really good question in terms of eating, because, if you just decide whether or not you're eating, which is, a little bit dumb that I'm saying this right now, because whether or not questions are just not working. But if you are eating this burger or you're not eating this burger, or let's say you're eating this burger or you're eating this wrap. This wrap may be a little bit expensive or more expensive, and the burger more cheap, but the burger is just really unhealthy and the wrap is not. And then you might be like, how do you feel about eating this after 10 minutes and or 10 months and or 10 years? Maybe in 10 years you do not really give a fuck, but maybe in 10 minutes you will feel a little bit guilty because you haven't chosen the right one that contributes your preferences. So hello, I'm back again, and this video will be cut together. So I just had to go to eat. My mother wanted me to eat. But we will go along with this text, and it's not much left, and we will go through this today, and maybe we will go through something else afterwards. So, but let's see. I've just lost where for decades, so we are here. Can you see this? Yes, you can see this. For decades, psychologists have been studying a phenomenon called the mere exposure principle, which says that people develop a preference for things that are more familiar, i.e., merely being exposed to something makes us view it more positively. Yeah, there's nothing to say about or nothing to critique about that. When Robert Tsayonk, whatever, exposed people to various stimuli, nonsense word, Chinese type characters, photographs or faces, he found that the more they saw the stimuli, the more positive they felt about them. The more exposure principle represents a subtler form of short-term emotions. And I think this really contributes this whole, or my whole social media engagement, I don't know. The more people see my things, the more they like my things. This is what I get from this. Which seems a little bit weird or sounds a little bit weird, but could actually be true. It's just some kind of familiarization, as they were talking about, which is then, we get used to things and we just really and quickly adapt to things. That's our human nature, I guess. And because of that, this also contributes my thoughts and things I've learned yesterday. Gary Vee said that volume is oftentimes much better than quality. You should really have quantity and quality, but in the first run you should have a lot of volume, a lot of quantity, and because this also contributes this thinking or this idea, because the more volume or the more quantity you have, or the more posts you put out, the more the people see this, and the more they will like it, because the more they see, the more they like, which is just great for all the social media influencers and so on. Compounding this preference for the status quo is another bias called loss aversion, which says that we find losses more painful than gains are pleasant. Research suggests that we set ourselves up for loss aversion almost instantly. When you put these two forces together, the mere exposure principle and loss aversion, what you get is a powerful bias for the way things work today. A relatively new era of research in psychology called contextual level theory shows that with more distance we can see more clearly the most important dimensions of the issue we are facing. And I just have to think about what they have said above here, and I just read it again because I think it's important. When you put these two forces together, so the mere exposure principle and the loss aversion. The loss aversion, again, because I just a little bit read over it, the loss aversion says that we find losses more painful than gains are pleasant, which there is something behind this, and there is something behind this that could be used in terms of social media, of course. I was thinking about putting, you can say everything in a positive way and in a negative way. You can see how to get more followers or how to not lose a lot of followers, which would then contribute the pain of loss, and therefore would be a better value for the people who are watching this video or seeing this post, because they think losing a lot more followers is more pain than gaining more followers is pleasant. And therefore, if that makes any sense, I'm just a little bit figuring out what they're saying and maybe giving you examples so that you can think along with me and or think forward as well. But I'll stop this now because I don't know. But let's see. A relatively new area of research in psychology called construal level theory shows that with more distance we can see more clearly the most important dimensions of the issue we are facing. There's another advantage of the advice we give others. We tend to be wise about consoling people to overlook short-term emotions. The advice... Oh my god. The advice we give others has two big advantages. It naturally prioritizes the most important factors in the decision, and it downplays short-term emotions. Okay, in helping us to make a decision, the single most effective question may be, what would I tell my best friend to do in this situation? Which is interesting, because I think it's totally true. You know, if you're just telling someone, or not yourself, especially someone, a best friend, or your mother, or your, some of your beloved ones, you first of all wouldn't talk to them any shit, and you wouldn't tell them to do any shit, and you will be really objective. And I think that's what they really want to say, that by giving advice to someone, you're very objective and you do not think about your emotions, because you want to give them something which doesn't really have something to do with your emotions, maybe with your way of thinking and so on, which is or makes totally sense because of decisions you make or thoughts you have. It's because of you and so on, if you get what I mean. Fleeting emotions tempt us to make decisions that are bad in the long term. To overcome distracting short-term emotions, we need to attain some distance. The 10-10-10 analysis provides distance by forcing us to consider future emotions as much as present ones. So the 10-10-10 analysis is how will I think about it, or how will I feel about it in 10 minutes, 10 months, and or 10 years. Our decisions are often altered by two subtle short-term emotions. The first one is mere exposure. We like what's familiar to us, and the second one, loss aversion. Losses are more painful than gains are pleasant. So we really take something that's familiar to us, and we think that contributes our thinking, as I'm talking a lot about contributing your thinking, and therefore you make decisions because they contribute your lifestyle, your thinking, your you, some kind of. But loss aversion, you will not choose something that's painful to you, because this is a loss, or maybe a loss, and it's some kind of hard. Maybe I'll read again after the episode, and then I'll get it maybe much quicker than before. Loss aversion plus mere exposure is a status quo bias. We can attain distance by looking at our situation from an observer's perspective. Perhaps the most powerful question for resolving personal decisions is, what would I tell my best friend to do in the situation? I think I've just read this entire thing again because I'm a dumb motherfucker. I'm sorry for that. But the 9th one, oh my god, honor your core priorities. And if they are actually going to say what I'm saying all the time, that you should look at your priorities and see what decision or option of this decision is really contributing your priorities, then I'll make a backflip. The goal of the WRAP process is not to neutralize emotion, quite the contrary. When you stripe away all the rational mechanics of decisions making, the generation of options The weighing of information, what's left at the core is emotion. What drives you? What kind of person do you aspire to be? And what do you believe is best for your family in the long run? Business leaders ask, what kind of organization do you aspire to run? What's best for your team in the long run? Those are emotional questions speaking to passions and values and beliefs, and when you answer them, there's no rational machine. Underneath that is generating your perspective, just who you are and what you want. The buck stops with emotion. When we identify and enshrine our priorities, our decisions are more consistent and less agonizing. People rarely establish their priorities until they are forced to do. Establishing priorities is not the same thing as binding yourself to them. Look back over your schedule for the past week and ask yourself, what specifically would I have given up to carve out the extra 3 or 4 or 5 hours that I'll need? And Peter Bergman advises people to set a timer that goes off once every hour, and when it beeps, we should ask ourselves, am I doing what I most need to be doing right now? This is actually something that reminds me in the book, The One Thing. I'll show you the cover and then you might know the one thing is this one. Can you see this? Not really. Let's go to pictures. And this is this one, and the whole takeaway from this book is that we should always be thinking about the one thing that leads us to where we want to be, to our goal, and so on. And this is quite the same as Peter Bergman is talking about. Am I doing what I most need to be doing right now? What I most need? Or maybe you're just doing some bullshit. Core priorities are long-term emotional values, goals, aspirations. By identifying and ensuring our core priorities, and I've already read that, to carve out space to pursue our core priorities, we must go on the offense against lesser priorities. So just have less priorities than before, and then everything will be fine, some kind of. There's actually a lot more, but I'll go through it, even though the episode will be around 30 minutes, but that's actually okay. Chapter 10, Bookend the Future. When people adopt a second style of thinking, using perspective, hindsight to work backward from a certain future, they are better at generating explanations for why the event might happen. In an FMEA, team members identify what could go wrong at every step of their plans, and for each potential failure, they ask 2 questions. How likely is it, and how severe would the consequences be? After assigning a score from 1 to 10 for each variable, they multiply the numbers to get a total. The highest totals, the most severe potential failures, get the most attention. Prepared asks us to consider success. So let's say it's a year from now and our decisions has been a wild success. It's so great that there is going to be a parade in our honor. Given that future, how do we ensure that we have or we are ready for it? The future is not a point, a single scenario that we must predict. It is a range. We should bookend the future considering a range of outcomes from very bad to very good. To prepare for the lower bookend, we need a premortem. It's a year from now, our decisions has failed utterly. Why? To be ready for the upper bookend, we need a preparate. It's a year from now, we are heroes, we will be ready for success. To prepare for what can't be foreseen, we can use a safety factor. Anticipating problems helps us cope with them. By bookending anticipation and preparing for both adversity and success, we stack the deck in favor of decisions. Chapter 11, Set the Tripwire. I'm a little bit going over it because I want you to have everything in this episode, and I don't really care now if I get what is in there. Book in the future. The goal of Tripwire is to jolt us out of our unconscious routines and make us aware that we have a choice to make. At some point, the virtue of being persistent turns into the vice of denying reality. Pilots are taught to pay careful attention to what are called lemurs, the vogue, I don't know, feeling that something isn't right even if it's not clear why. Having a label for those feelings legitimizes them and makes pilots less likely to dismiss them. The flash of recognition, oh, this is a lemur, causes a quick shift from autopilot to manual control, from unconscious to conscious behavior. In life, we naturally slip into autopilot, leaving past decisions unquestioned. A tripwire can snap us awake and make us realize we have a choice. Tripwires can be especially useful when change is gradual. For people stuck on autopilot, consider deadlines or partitions. We tend to escalate our investment in poor decisions. Partitions can help rein that in. Tripwires can actually create a safe space for risk taking. They, first of all, cap risk, and second of all, quiet our mind until the trigger is hit. Many powerful tripwires are triggered by patterns rather than dates, metrics, and/or budget. Tripwires can provide a precious realization. We have a choice to make. Chapter 12, and this is the last chapter, trusting the process. Procedural justice is critical in determining how people feel about a decision. We should make sure people are able to perceive that the process is just. A trustworthy process can help us navigate even the thorniest decisions. Process isn't glamorous, but the confidence it can provide is precious. Trusting a process can permit us to take bigger risks, to make bolder choices. Studies of the elderly show that people regret not what they did, but what they didn't do. And that's always the thing. If you ask a 100-year-old, they will not tell you about what they did. They maybe will talk about what they didn't do and how they regret what they didn't do. And for this, I am saying goodbye, and I hope you have a very, very, very great day. And if there are any questions or anything you want to talk about, all the links are in the description. If you are on YouTube video, if you're listening to the podcast, in the podcast description should be everything, every information you're seeking. And for this now, I really have to thank you for listening and or watching. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And yeah, please hit me up if there's anything. I'm always there for any question. I'll see you the next time. Thank you.